Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another cool review for you from the brand Cincinnati Watch Company. Now you might have remembered and recalled this brand. They're a little bit new to the game, or at least new to the YouTube scene. But recently they released their P40M model, which I was hugely fond of and hope to add to my collection eventually, hopefully once they come into full production. But right now I wanted to share with you guys a really cool piece that's actually another pre-order that they're putting together still, where some of your input will actually be taken into consideration here. So make sure you pay attention for that and give your feedback in the comments, because the team over there is definitely watching out, and they did give me a few questions to kind of raise to you guys as far as some of the options. Of course, Cincinnati Watch Company is US based out of Cincinnati, and they basically offer very high quality, super nicely crafted watches inspired by Cincinnati, the city that they love, pretty much. And basically a portion of each and every sale of watches produced benefit different local Cincinnati institutions that add value. So I think that's really cool kind of inner story if you care about that parts of the brand. I think it's nice to have something that's just a little bit more genuine versus something that is just kind of a completely fabricated kind of past or ethos. I think it's really cool that they're just actively, pairing and partnering with companies out there that they feel add value to their community, and that's definitely commendable. Now, about this type of watch, of course, I would consider this a classic field watch. Some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a field watch. Of course, you're going to want that kind of modest vintage size. You're going to look for some Arabic numerals, normally with the 24 and 12-hour scale, and the dial would typically be either in a black or a cream. At least for the classic field watch, if you will, which I think this definitely does a really great job of kind of embodying without actually looking like an homage to very much else that's out there. This particular model, it will be known as the Cincinnatus Field Watch, and it has quite a cool background and story. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this piece in hand for a closer look. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a closer look. Here you go. Really beautiful texture. Hopefully the camera will be able to pick that up. You can see that nice kind of granular texture there across the dial, which really adds a bit of age to it, and I think definitely some nice visual interest. Ties in really well with all of the gilt accents there. Very, very nicely done. Now, the Cincinnatus Field Watch, it was essentially has a bit of a background here. So Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus was basically a Roman politician and a statesman and a military leader in the Roman Republic, and basically he's pretty legendary in the world of Roman lore. Now, Cincinnati is not named after Cincinnatus, but the Society of Cincinnati was named after Cincinnatus, and essentially Cincinnati was named after that society. So without getting too deep, there's definitely some links below if you want to get into the heavy-handed history of here, but I think it's definitely cool to have a bit of a history lesson when you do get to kind of scout out your watch. So I think that's pretty cool. Now, one thing about kind of the modern side of this is, the Society of Cincinnati was comprised of Revolutionary War soldiers, at first. And then it was basically one of the nation's first hereditary organizations. So they would pass down, kind of membership hereditarily, down to their kids and to their kids' kids. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And basically, they're going to honor the Free Store Food Bank and all of its invaluable work that it provides to the Cincinnati, and so I think that's really cool for them to partner. Basically the Cincinnatus Field Watch is kind of dedicated to that, and I think that's really, really cool. So you get the story from before, and then you get something really cool to make a difference for now. And I think, obviously, to kind of quote Mad Men, it's not just a time piece, it's a conversation piece. And I think there's definitely a conversation to be had whenever you're looking at micro brands. And I think the nice thing is that they add some nice depth and layer and real personality and heart to the brand when, you meet somebody that's actually actually doing this not just to be an entrepreneur, but to actually do some charitable work as well as just be, a real watch fan. So the cool thing is these watches are actually super affordable. You're looking at this thinking, ooh, man, that is sweet. Look at it on this Horween strap. It comes with these other straps too. That's why they're pictured. But you know what? This thing, in the first month, you get special pricing for $239. And then basically, if the second round after the first month of pre-ordering is going to be $249. And then even if you wait till the very end, the full price is only $299, which is pretty insane. So you'd be buying that direct from Cincinnati Watch Company. Now, as far as when these are actually going to be released, definitely check the links for updates because it's all, pretty early on. This is actually one of the first prototypes that they've made and kind of been tinkering with, and I was lucky enough to be able to review it and kind of debut it for you guys here. Now, as far as what's included, you're going to actually get a pretty standard looking NATO here, which I think definitely does a job. It has that kind of tubular stitching there. I think it could be a little bit longer. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. I think basically, at least for my 7 1/4 inch wrist, I do prefer a full 12-inch length, or longer, just because of when you have anything shorter than that, which the standard is probably closer to 10 1/2 or 11. Essentially, once you get it on the wrist, you end up not having enough to loop back through, right? It's going to come up short, which I'm not crazy about. Of course, you could always cut the tongue off or whatever, but I prefer it to be a little bit longer, or at least short enough to where there's not enough of that tongue that's going to be hanging out. But let me know what you guys think. Also, I think it'd be nice to have a sliding keeper. That definitely helps negotiate issues with the size and having to be able to either slide it down to accommodate longer tongue sticking out, right, so that it could basically be tucked if you could just scoot this keeper down, or you could actually set it closer and then make it fold back because you're bringing these closer together. So that's also something to look at. Also is included is this canvas strap, which is actually still in development. Again, let me know what your guys' feedback is on this. This is pretty much just a one-sided canvas strap, well, two-sided technically, but they're actually considering doing a kind of padded leather option, something thicker with a bit more backing on it. So I think that'd be a really cool choice. I think I would prefer something, with kind of leather backed and padded. But some of you guys might want something just, pretty much like a really minimalist two-piece there. So, let me know what you guys think as far as that goes. But that will be included. And then, as far as the optional side goes, for another $65, which is actually a pretty great deal for a, Horween leather strap. And the cool thing is they're actually going to have basically 3 lengths, so you can actually get this in a very tailored fit. The only difference is going to be this is actually going to be brushed versus the bead blast finish you see here. But essentially, this is going to be how they're going to come, and they'll actually be available in kind of a short, medium, and long length, which means you're really going to be able to have it tailored nicely to your wrist. And I think, of course, this is pretty much the way to go. Or you could go with, I think a one piece would be good, or even these two. I mean, that looks killer as well. So I mean, this thing is going to be a strap monster when it's released. Let's just put it out there right now. Now, as far as the diameter and everything, this is a 39 millimeter, which is a really nice size for something without a turning bezel. So perfect for kind of every day, but not overpowering or anything like that, where it's going to look super huge on the wrist, or it's definitely not going to look small. So 39 millimeters in diameter, you got a 12 millimeter thickness or height. And then it's actually 12.4 millimeters if you want to include the crystal there, which barely peeks up. If you can even, there you go, get a good look at it there. And then the lug to lug is actually just 47 millimeters, which is nice. And then of course the lugs do turn down really well and have a nice sweep to them. This is of course an all brushed stainless steel with that very nicely polished fixed bezel there. As far as the crown goes, it's a screw down crown and it's signed really nicely, no crown guards or anything like that. And one very interesting thing that you'll find here on this piece is this movement, which is actually very rare for a lot of reasons. One, nobody really uses it, and two, you just don't see it. This is actually the first application I've actually seen people do, and I know that basically Seiko Instruments, they make tons of different variations. And this is one that's always interested me, but it's really cool to see somebody actually put one in a watch. This movement is actually a skeletonized no date movement, which is really cool. And of course, it has that cool finishing, and then the gold plating. So that is really handsome and different, which I think is really great and does add a ton of value. It's not a higher beat or anything like that, but it is a no date, so you're not going to have a ghost position on that crown, which is really, really great. Let me just make sure that the camera can capture this dial before I go into too many more details about it. So as far as the, well, just quickly about the movement, of course it has a 3 Hz sweep, so it's going to be 6 ticks a second. It has a 40-hour power reserve and is hacking and hand windable. The case back is, of course, a display case back, and it does have some nice etching there, just to give you a little bit of info about the watch. Now, as far as the dials go, you can really get that really nice, finely textured black dial. You have these great printed indices that are very, very legible. You have the gilt hands and kind of outer minute track with that 24-hour scale there. So you have, some really nice color play and contrast going on the dial, which is something that is a bit tough to find when it comes to very traditional field watches. So I think it's really nice to kind of have some of that color pop and some of that play there. And I think they did a really cool job kind of integrating some real depth and some warmth to the dial with this really cool gilt layout. Now, as far as the lume goes, Super Luminova BGW9, water resistant up to 10 atmospheres or 100 meters, which is great. It has a 20 millimeter lug width, which is also awesome. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this piece on the wrist. All right, now as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, this thing wears just about perfectly. Really loving the tone of brown, that kind of golden hue to it that this really nice leather strap has. Really cool black stitching there, ties in really well to the dial. Even up close here, you can see, even though some lens distortion is going to make it appear much bigger, it still doesn't really appear oversized. And then when you do have, some perspective, you get the whole arm, more of the arm in view, it definitely kind of balances out the scale of how this is going to look on the wrist. Versus just kind of in a up close wristy, wristy McWrist shot. Now, as far as the way it lays on the wrist, you can see nice profile there. Not riding too high off of the wrist, really wrapping around it nicely. This strap is super comfortable and sturdy feeling, so really nice from that aspect there. And you can see great range of motion. I do wear my watches a bit looser and lower on the wrist versus I think some people like to wear them a little higher above the wrist bone and a little bit tighter. I choose to kind of give myself some room for some summer swelling, and I like to just have the watch just a little bit lower, which means I do value kind of the ergonomics a lot more, because I do have to think about the rotation of my wrist whenever I wear a wristwatch. So when it comes to comfort, that's something that plays a bigger role because of where I wear it on the wrist. And I think it looks absolutely great. So with that said, let's go ahead and move into some lume shots and some low light transition. Okay guys, another quick little warning before we go lights out. This is of course just a prototype, so there will be some changes made, and typically the prototypes aren't quite as lume heavy, but we'll see how this one fares. Yeah, as you can see, definitely a little bit pale in kind of comparison to what you would see on the finished model. Let's go ahead and get a little bit of black light just to kind of give you guys an idea of what this thing will look like, and you can see where the lume is actually applied because it's a bit dim here on this prototype. And again, this isn't really meant to be a big lume beast or anything like that, but outside of lume shots, one thing I like to do is actually get some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in direct sunlight. You're going to be coming in and out of vehicles, if coming in from outside, outdoors, you're not always going to be out in the middle of a park in direct sunlight. So you do get to see a nice idea of the way the light plays off of this dial, really how black it is or how gray it can become depending on the light situations. And of course, you also get a nice look at the finishing on the case, because although my hot studio lights do a great job of kind of rendering, you know, a well-lit, full, you know, direct sunlight kind of scheme here, one thing that tends to do is actually wash out a lot of the details. Here you can actually take a nice look at the way the light rolls off of that brushing. You can see the uniformity on it, really, really nice. And you can also see the way the light dances around that really well executed bezel there. So really cool. And we'll go ahead and get back to full brightness here. So, you know, closing thoughts on the wrist, it's really just a perfect wear. It's a great blend of design elements, and it's definitely going to be a total strap monster. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. Now, as far as comparable models go, I would say, you know, there's the Hamilton khakis of the world that are all out there that are pretty much the benchmark when it comes to you know, to field watches. I think there's some similar things now from Seiko, but of course they're all very much, you know, like the Sarg lines. Those are great field watches, but those are going super expensive now, way overpriced, because they're discontinued. They're great watches, don't get me wrong, but here you're getting a very similar package. So I'm not necessarily in aesthetics, but as far as the job that it's providing, so I think it's something that's a little bit more comparable to that side of it. Would I rather have this, or, you know, spend $600 on you know, somebody's used Sark's, not Sark's, but Sarg 011? I would probably rather have this at a much cheaper price, less than half of the cost. You know, the bottom line here, you really have a perfect addition to any field watch collection, or, you know, just a great everyday option with tons of character. And, you know, this thing really just oozes that. It doesn't look like, you know, your typical wristwatch. It has definitely the field watch kind of theme there, because you got the Arabic numerals, but at the same time with the color play, it definitely is paying homage to kind of that vintage gilt dial, and then you pair it with different straps, you kind of get different vibes, and I think it's just a great looking, very versatile piece. But you know what, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do it like, and if you're not already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.